back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Ellie and Martin. We're going through some of your views here this morning. A big story in front of all of the papers is, of course, Harry's revelations in his new book, Spare. It wasn't due out until next Tuesday, but it was somehow published in Spain and out in the bookshops yesterday. So is that a massive PR stunt or is that a security blunder? We're not quite sure. I'm going to put that to Cameron Walker, our royal reporter, in just a few minutes' time. But for the time being, Nada's been in touch. Good morning to you. She says, like most royals, Harry was forced into the military. Anything that happened at that time is on his father's conscience. His father did nothing to change that tradition. If it was anyone else, he would be hailed a hero. But to that, Nada, I would say, how many armed forces personnel do you know who would be happy to speak about their number, their hit number, how many people they've killed? I have never met one. No, I could be in the wrong.
No, I mean, I haven't. I speak to a lot of veterans, and they're horrified about this. Another point here from David in Cowes, who says it's utterly disgusting that a member of the British royal family should openly boast about killing 25 Taliban soldiers. These revelations, all for substantial monetary gain, and then whinge about being flawed by his brother. A lot of people making that point. It's like, on the one hand, you're wiping out, jihadists, and then you get shoved over into a dog bowl. Yeah. Hypocrisy there.
And this is a man who talks a lot about security, about the safety of his family. He moved to a different country in order to feel safer, but then perhaps now got the Taliban on his back. I mean, that's what Kinsey Schofield was saying a little bit earlier on, wasn't she? He's put a target on his back. And Julia has been in touch this morning. She says, so many families are struggling with high energy bills. She has no time for this couple who were given a wedding, a home and fame by the great British public. And I'm sure, Julia, a lot of people agree with you. They feel a great fondness for Harry after everything that he went through with his mother. And they're sad to see that it's got to this, especially between two brothers.
OK, let's move away from the headlines now. Let's dive inside the papers, and we're joined once again this hour by Liz Kershaw and Fraser Myers. Top of the morning to you both. Liz, let's start with you. This story seems suitably ludicrous, and that is, of course, it's the Daily Star. Coincidence. Rewriting history once again. Neil Armstrong's speech about landing on the moon should have been gender neutral.
Yeah, it's in other papers as well, but the Star does have its own style. So Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon, the first Hugh person ever, can't say human, and he said, that's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. And NASA is saying, you can't say man anymore, you've got to say crew and crew kind. And it's just ridiculous.
Is this April Fool's or is this real?
No, this is real. We don't speak in gendered terms, says NASA. Right. So think about, it's romantic, the moon, and today it's a full moon and it's the wolf moon because it's supposed to set wildlife off howling, but it's beautiful. And I'm thinking, as a music fan, as you are, Martin, of all the songs about the moon, Howling at the Moon from the Ramones, and then R.E.M., Man on the Moon. And I'm thinking you'd have to change the lyrics. So instead of if you believe they put a man on the moon, you'd have to sing, if you believe they put a human identified as biologically male at birth on the moon.
That's where we're at.
It doesn't stand, does it?
It's ludicrous. I mean, Fraser, this is the bread and butter for Spiked. I mean, you're always sort of raging, quite rightly, against this. I mean, it started off as harmless, as snowflakes, but it's actually, I think, quite insidious. This is one of the most important moments in mankind's history, being rewritten by these clowns.
Well, I think it's important to recognise that, it's not just blue-haired students who go along with this stuff. This is NASA. This is scientists, supposedly rational people. And, surely they know that words like mankind are gender neutral. How can you get more inclusive than talking about the whole of mankind? That covers everyone of every gender, of every race, of every person that lives now, lived before and lives in the future. It does not get more inclusive than that. I'm reminded of when the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he chided a Canadian citizen. She talked about mankind, and he said, I think you'll find it's a people kind.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
And now these lunatics are running the asylum. So let's move on to...
Yeah, let's head on to China, shall we? Abandoning controversial zero-COVID policy and now denying that they've been underreporting COVID deaths.
Well, it's extraordinary. Look, in the Eye is reporting that China only reported a single death yesterday in mainland China, despite the loosening of restrictions, despite estimations that around 1 million people are being infected with COVID every day. And we know the Chinese vaccines are not really up to snuff. So, unfortunately, we should expect a lot of people to die. It's a reminder of the folly of kind of copying China, because that's something that, you know, not only did we get the lockdown policy from China early on, but even when we were in lockdown, there were still many scientists, so many so-called experts in the UK who are pushing for us to adopt this zero COVID policy.
Jeremy Hunt was a fan of that.
Jeremy Hunt hinted at it. Nicola Sturgeon said she was adopting a zero COVID policy. Obviously, she wasn't locking people in or, you know, welding people into their apartments like in China or anything like that. But people had a kind of scary admiration for this authoritarianism, and they justified it on the basis that it worked. Clearly, it hasn't worked. 3 years later, China is facing disaster and humiliation.
Yeah, and it's amazing when you look back on that social experiment, and people talk about reparations for things like slavery. What about reparations from China, what they did to the planet?
Well, I mean, we don't really know. It's still a mystery in terms of the origins of COVID. We know that they've tried to block investigations into the origins. We know that they tried to cover up many of the first cases of
so
COVID.
Did big tech, Facebook, Google. They didn't want to talk about the Wuhan lab.
It's pretty extraordinary. I mean, it just goes to show that you know, the level of censorship that is exercised at the moment both in the West and in China poses a real danger to us. It's not misinformation that poses the real danger, it's censorship.
On a lighter note, Liz, you talked about being a music fan, and
it's not like serious, Martin.
This is music to my ears. I love a bit of Britpop. It's making a return. Britpop is coming back.
Pulp are reforming and Blur are reforming.
Great.
Don't get too excited. The Gallagher brothers are still at loggerheads, and Liam and Noel performing separately to huge outdoor concerts. But yeah, Blur, Pulp got 90,000 capacity festivals to play this summer, and so the Telegraph music correspondent is getting excited about this, Neil McCormick. However, there's a caveat. Where are the new bands that are rebellious? We talked about this before, and are making great songs with great musicianship, and this is really interesting.
Sorry, I'm afraid